Well, Bunnings is one of Australia's most trusted brands, but the hardware chain is under the microscope, accused of throwing its weight around in ways that could hurt suppliers and shoppers. The claims form part of a new Four Corners investigation, and reporter Angus Grigg joins us now. Angus, what prompted this investigation into Bunnings?
Yeah, good morning. Well, I think there's been a great deal of scrutiny on our hardware sector, and we hear lots about how profitable the big two supermarkets are, Coles and Woolworths. But we hear very little about Bunnings, and that's, I guess, curious given that Bunnings, on a couple of really key measures, is twice as profitable as Coles and Woolworths. And then, according to its rivals, its market share or its market power is the equivalent of that of Coles and Woolworths combined, maybe even throw in a little bit of Aldi there. So despite having a huge market dominance and being super profitable, there's almost no scrutiny on Bunnings. And so that's a pretty good lead for a Four Corners reporter, I think.
And you visited some other hardware stores, including a suburban Mitre 10. What did they tell you?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting case study, actually. So just south of Brisbane, there's a suburb called Jimboomba. It's a sort of growth area. Just the south near the Gold Coast there. And there's a Mitre 10 store owned by a family there, the Woodmans. And right next door is a vacant block of land. And Bunnings have purchased that block of land, and they are planning to set up right next door to the Mitre 10. Now, the Mitre 10 owner argues that shoppers already have the choice of going to Bunnings. There's 3 Bunnings within a pretty easy drive of that Mitre 10. And he says that if it goes ahead and does open as planned, then most likely he will be put out of business. And he says that he accuses Bunnings of being predatory, of only wanting to open up next door to him to put him out of business. Now, the interesting thing here is firstly that he says that he offers a different service and different products to Bunnings, and his prices are pretty comparable. But he says it's consumers that will lose out because ultimately they won't have that choice of service or choice of products. But the little wrinkle here, and we live in a free market and things like that, but the wrinkle is here that while Bunnings is pretty well free to open up next door to David Woodman's Mitre 10 in Jimboomba, it's very difficult for competitors of Bunnings to open up next door to it. And so what we've sort of looked at in the program tonight is these so-called exclusivity clauses in many leases. And this means that, Bunnings can set up next to the Mitre 10 in Jimboomba, but its rivals find it very difficult to set up next door to Bunnings in the same sort of shopping centres, because Bunnings effectively blocks them out. And the point is here, once again with the comparison to the supermarkets, is that this practice of restrictive lease clauses was phased out for Coles and Woolworths in about 2009 under an agreement with the ACCC, as it was seen as explicitly anti-competitive, that it stifled competition. But once again, there's no such rules that apply to Bunnings.
And further on those comparisons, how does Bunnings compare to Coles or Woolworths in terms of its size and power in Australian retail? Yeah,
absolutely overwhelming. You look at, as I said before, Bunnings is on 2 measures twice as profitable as Coles and Woolworths. It has a what you call a sort of profit margin of around 17%. The supermarkets are in single figures. It has a return on capital of about 70%. So if you're a pretty good business, you would be happy with 20%. So when you're posting those sort of numbers, someone is losing out. And typically, it's the consumer that loses out. It usually means that you're paying more to have less choice. And so the other thing about Bunnings is that it's not subject to the same regulatory environment as the supermarkets. So there is a code of conduct for the supermarkets. They can be fined anywhere from $10 million to $1 billion for breaching that code of conduct. But Bunnings, despite having overwhelming market power or a huge market power, they are not subject to any code of conduct. And that means that their suppliers, who are very reliant on Bunnings, really have no avenue to complain, to talk about unfair pricing practices or Bunnings using its market power. So you really have this 2-tiered system here in Australia. Huge scrutiny on the supermarkets, almost no scrutiny on Bunnings, despite it being significantly more profitable and having a market position that is very dominant.
And has Bunnings responded to your story?
Look, the Bunnings CEO didn't sit down with us. They gave us written answers to our questions, which is not particularly useful for a TV program. But they did respond.
And you can see that full story on Four Corners tonight at 8:30 on ABC TV and on iView.